Blog Talk Radio.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Women of Golf Show. I'm Ted Roderico, and right alongside, of course, each and every week is none other than LPGA Professional and Legends Tour player Cindy Miller, and we are the hosts of the Women of Golf Show. Good morning, Cindy. Welcome.
Good morning, Ted. How are you doing?
Well, I'm not doing too bad. We managed to, as they say, dodge a bullet in our area in Florida, and of course, I did get out of the state and stayed up with my girlfriend Carol in southern Alabama for a few days through the weekend, and we were very fortunate. But as we all know from watching many of the television broadcasts, that there were some areas that were hit very, very difficult. So we're very fortunate on our end here, but certainly our thoughts and prayers go out to those that maybe got caught in some of the areas down in Naples, and obviously the Keys were hit very, very bad first and foremost. But Naples and even over to Miami, Cindy, got some really, really rough weather through the early parts of the weekend. But it seemed to kind of fizzle out as it moved up the coast. So we're very fortunate of that. But what a great, testament to many of the first responders in that, and many of the officials for really stepping up and their preparedness. I don't know how much of the broadcasts and that you saw through the weekend, but they just really stepped up and were prepared for what was about to happen. So we have to give a shout out to all of the responders and all of the officials for making that happen and evacuating the state and that sort of thing. So great job to all the men and women for doing that. But and obviously later last night and yesterday afternoon up in the Carolinas and parts of Atlanta or in Georgia, saw some rough weather, some tornadoes and that as well. So hopefully everybody's safe. The thing is, Cindy, there's so many golf professionals and people in the golf industry in this whole corridor of the Southeast that many of them were affected. Fortunately, most of them did evacuate, but there were some that hunkered down, and I know a few personally that I was glad to see through social media that they made it through okay. So glad that you guys made it. And then also, Cindy, very quickly, I think it certainly would be prudent of us to certainly acknowledge yesterday, of course, was the 16th anniversary of 9/11, one of the most horrific tragedies that's really ever hit the shores of here in the United States. And again, our thoughts and prayers go out to those victims of that tragedy, but also especially to the first responders who really lost their lives giving to help many of those that were trapped in the towers and on the flights, of course, that were involved, but also to the families, for just what they've had to go through this last 16 or so years. But just a very tragic, circumstance, and our thoughts and prayers go out to the victims of 9/11.
Absolutely.
It's just a tragedy, but certainly one that most will never forget. Let me just remind you, Cindy, before we start, we got a great show for everybody tuning into the broadcast. But let me just remind everybody real quick, Cindy, how to tune in. Go to blogtalkradio.com every Tuesday morning from 9 to 10 a.m. Eastern here on the network, and just type in, up in the search key, type Women of Golf, and that will take you to the live broadcast if you're tuning on Tuesdays. And if not, if you're after the live broadcast, you can still visit that link and just scroll down to the on-demand section and, again, type in Women of Golf, and that will take you to that page. And as I said, scroll down to the on-demand section, and you can listen to any of the previously aired broadcasts in their entirety through the auto-recorded program. But also, for those of you that prefer maybe a different platform, you can go to iTunes.com or Stitcher.com, and under the podcast section, again, just type in Women of Golf, and that will take you there, and you can listen on either of those media platforms. Also, would love to hear from you. You're welcome to call in anytime during the live broadcast here on Tuesday mornings from 9 to 10 Eastern, and the number to call is area code 347-945-5855. And also, if you're somebody in the golf industry, or if you have any questions or comments about the show and you'd like to reach out to either Cindy or I, Cindy's email is cindy@cindymillergolf.com, and mine is ted.golftalklive@gmail.com. As I mentioned, we've got a great show for you this morning. Cindy and I are going to start off with a discussion, and the topic today is what do you get out of a golf playing lesson, and is it worth it? And then a little bit later in the show, in the second half, we're going to be joined by both PGA and LPGA Professional Susan Kaffenburgh. She's a member instructor at the Bayberry Hills Golf Course in Cape Cod, Massachusetts. So she'll be joining us on the second half. But Cindy, let me just very quickly, before we start our discussion, you were involved in some tournaments here recently. You want to tell us a little bit about each of them?
I was. I went down to Pinehurst, where I competed in the LPGA National T&CP Championship. I played in the senior division, and I was a little bipolar. I was either great or I was terrible. And I finished 14th by myself. I shot 76, 80, 77, and I seemed to have lots of I either made doubles or I made birdies or a couple pars. It was just kind of strange, but I learned an awful lot about me, and I was very excited about my finish. My Pro-Am team, which I had two of my younger girl students, we won. We defended our title. We had what we call the dads and daughters team, and we won the low net division, and they were thrilled. They all got Titleist golf bags and a dozen Titleist golf balls. Yeah, and then I flew immediately following the tournament to Boston, and I was at the Legends Tour BJ's Charity Classic, and the first day I taught 10 women who really didn't play golf, who were kind of afraid to learn to play, and there was a Pro-Am going on. They had called me and said, do you mind if you don't play and if you teach the executive women? And I said, I'd love to do that. So I taught on Thursday, and then Friday was an invitational with 12 teams, and I was fortunate enough to play with Lori West as my partner, and the front nine was best ball, and the back nine was a two-person scramble. And we tied for eighth, and I played really, really, really well. So I guess what I'd like to share with the listeners is that learning how to play is a very long process. And I've played for a really long time, and I'm still learning. And I believe that the progression of being able to compete at the highest level is such that, number one, you have to know how to hit the ball, and you have to know how to chip, and you have to know how to putt, and then you need to know what kind of shots to hit in certain situations, and then you need to know what kind of shots to hit in certain situations when there's a gun pointed at your head, because the last tournament round I played was my best. And it's funny because my partner wasn't at her best until it's the best ball tournament and the golf course. It was at the Ridge Club on Cape Cod, which was absolutely gorgeous, I might add. And it was a downhill par 4, and I outdrove my partner, so she hit first and she dumped it in the water. Now, I'm like, oh boy, thanks. because now I've got the heat on me, never played the course, don't know how it's going to play. Well, I knocked it on the green, and I two-putted for par, gratefully. And I shot 1 under par on that front 9, and our team was 1 under par. So it's funny because at the end of the round, Lori said to me, holy cow, the more pressure I put on you, the better you were. So what I have found for me is that I almost need to play in total pursuit mode with a gun pointed at my head. Because when I go in la-la land, I don't perform. So I'd like to tell our listeners that, our discussions about playing lessons and if they help.
Yep.
And the only way they're going to help is if you really want to learn to play better and score better. And you're not, in my opinion, you're not allowed to do a playing lesson until you can hit the ball from point A to point B. So you have to have the skill level to hit the shot, and then you need to know how to think and what shot to hit when, where, and how, and only then will you really benefit greatly by doing a playing lesson. You have to be totally engaged. What do you think?
No, you're exactly right, Cindy. I think that first and foremost, you have to understand the basics of the golf swing, and you have to be able to as you said, hit from point A to point B. You certainly don't have to, you don't have to strike one 250 yards down the middle of the fairway. That's not what we're talking about. But you need to have some sort of consistency in your hitting, if you will, in order to really benefit from it. And I've seen lots of players that can't hit very far, but boy, can they score. And I've seen other people that can, belt it a mile, but they just can't put a round together. And again, it goes to, what you were just talking about is they're just all over the place. And, sometimes that added pressure, in your case, it actually is a plus. For some people, it has the opposite effect. And this is one of the reasons why, because we hear now in the industry a lot about playing lessons, and, you and I both understand it, and most of the other teach professionals out there, certainly subscribe to it. But a lot of folks may not understand what we're talking about. And I think it's important, as you said, once you sort of have the generals and the basics well at hand, that you engage in that. Because really, the truth of the matter is, Cindy, it's about how you play the game that really counts, not how well you hit the ball. I mean, certainly you want to have some ability, but you don't have to be the perfect or the best ball striker on the earth. But you do have to be able to put it all together and be smart about navigating around the golf course. So let's talk about just a little bit, just very quickly here, and then we'll get into some other stuff. But some of the things as a teacher or coach, during a playing lesson with some of your students, obviously we're going to walk around the course with them, and we want to keep track of some things. And here's some things that we're going to be mindful of as we go around, and we want to see how many fairways that you're going to be able to hit, and we're going to keep track of these stats, and there's a reason why. We'll talk about that. How many greens that you're going to hit in regulation. Obviously, we're going to be counting and seeing how many putts it takes you to sink it into the hole once you do get on the green. How you handle your ups and downs and things like that, and what clubs you're using, on your approach shots. Are you hitting, from way back in the fairway, or are you getting it up close enough that you can hit with some of your scoring clubs like your wedges and so forth. And also proximity to the hole. Are you way over on the other side of the green, or are you getting it fairly close that's giving you some opportunities? And also, we're going to talk to you about penalties and be mindful of that. And then obviously we're going to wrap it up with the scoring. We're going to keep track of your scoring as well. But these are important factors, I think, Cindy, that as a golf instructor and coach, you have to be mindful of, and we want to watch. And the reason being, Cindy, I think is pretty obvious, is this is going to give us a pretty good gauge of how well their abilities are by how they do in some of these categories. Would you agree with that?
Yes, and I have to add, I don't know that people are aware of all these different categories. I've got some junior students that are playing in tournaments, and one little girl I said, let me know how you do. And so she just texted me the other day. I shot 93, 47, 46, and I said, okay, how many fairways, how many greens, how many putts? Well, I don't know. It's on the golf cart.
Yep.
And I said, well, how can I understand what's going on if we don't know what you did? So it's kind of like going to the doctor and saying, I don't really feel good. Well, they're going to do some tests. And those tests are going to be blood work, maybe urine sample, and so they can't say, oh, well, I think you've got this without knowing what the tests are. So fairways and greens and putts and up and downs and doubles and penalty shots and did you miss it left or did you miss it right, those are all indicators of what we need to work on. And if our students aren't aware of how to discern that, then we've really got nothing to help them with because they're not becoming aware of what's going on. So totally agree.
Yeah, we want to know as teacher professionals, we want to know if on each of the holes, as you pointed out, whether they're missing the fairway, whether there's a pattern to where they miss. Are they missing it on the same side of the hole all the time? That gives us an indication of obviously their ball flight. Did they miss when missing the green? Did they short side themselves? Meaning, did they not take enough club? So that falls into not just their physical ability, but their mental game as well. If they're falling short every time of the green, then they're not really assessing the hole properly. They're not allowing themselves to take enough club, or maybe in some cases, especially with some of the guys out there that are a little bit overconfident, that think that they're hitting their clubs a little bit further. This is why it's important in your practice sessions on the practice tee. You want to know the distances that you're hitting each of your clubs under different circumstances so that when you get out on the golf course and you're faced with a 150-yard shot, you're going to know, and this is assuming it's a fairly straight shot and not a lot of wind and things like that, you're going to know what club to pull out of the bag. And a lot of players don't. They end up short-siding themselves. So these categories are certainly extremely important, and as you pointed out, Cindy, help us to understand a player's weakness and their strengths, and helps us, of course, to... Go ahead.
I've got to interrupt you because, again, during the Pro-Am, the two girls that played, one is 12 with her dad, and the other one's 14, and I have not played with the 12-year-old on a golf course in a tournament ever before. And so while I was out there with them, I would say this is the yardage, this is how much uphill it plays, because in the practice round, what I did was I have a laser that tells me, slope. And you can't use that laser in a tournament, but I did that in the practice round, so I knew if it was uphill or downhill, right? And I would say, okay, it's 130, it's playing 145. And so she said a couple of times, I said, well, what club do you have? And she almost didn't want to tell me. And she said, 6-iron. I go, you can't hit your 6-iron that far. Oh, yes, I can. I said, I don't hit my 6-iron that far. And so every shot into the green, I think I got into her head. Now, she's 12. She probably weighs 98 pounds. And I'm not saying most 12-year-olds can't hit at 6-iron 145, but so she would hit it thin or skull it. And then look at me like, yeah, I can hit it that far. Well, I could skull it that far too, So again, it's up to us to really make our students aware of what's a good shot. And it's got to go in the air, and it's got to carry, and how far do you fly the ball, and all those extra things. If you want to play and compete, you need to be very aware of and not delusional. And so she's coming in for a lesson today, and that's what we're going to work on.
Right, and that just goes to the point, and it's not just with juniors that we see that, it's with really all levels or all age groups of golfers. We see a lot of that. They just don't understand. And really, to go back just very quickly, our primary question is, what do you get out of a golf course or a playing lesson, and is it worth it? The obvious answer is yes, and here's some of the reasons why, too. And you really laid it out very eloquently, Cindy, in your last comments, and that is the lack of really considering some of the options before they actually hit the shot. As an example, what is the lie of the ball? Is it sitting, down in rough, or is it sitting up? Because there's different reactions that the ball is going to have. Is it a flat or uneven lie? There's all kinds of factors, and I think a lot of golfers, and God love them, some of these junior golfers, they get out there and they've got all kinds of confidence and assurance out there that they can do it because they're young and they've got lots of strength and energy, but they don't really have a lot of mental chops, as I like to say, right yet, and that's something else that we really got to help them with. And as you said, you've got to get into their head and kind of help them formulate a game plan. They need to. I think one of the first things that I would say to them is really, let's do an assessment of the situation we're in. Let's take a look. Let's understand the lie. Let's understand the distance. Let's understand what obstacles may be there. Whether it be a bunker or water or what have you, and then based on that assessment, make an informed decision. And sometimes it's not going to be right, but at least you're sort of putting a game plan together. And I think that's what you were talking about, is really, she just thought, okay, I can hit my 6-iron that, and hits the old skull shot or what have you, and hits it down there, but it's really not the optimal shot. So really, she didn't really put a lot of thought into it. She just sort of grabbed what club she thought she was going to be able to hit. Correct?
Correct.
What are some other factors, do you think, during a playing lesson, or what other things in a playing lesson that do you really look for, Cindy, to help you help your students?
Well, I think you just hit the nail on the head, and it's all about assessing. So what I have learned is that people that are better than me, I have always tried to learn from them. So I believe that it's very important to humble yourself and say, you know what, they always play better than me. Why? What are they doing that I'm not doing? What am I doing that they're not doing? And so I think if you humble yourself and you become open and teachable, and you ask questions, then you can really improve. And I think sometimes students want to show you how good they can hit it, when really, like you said, it's not how good you hit it, it's how you maneuver and play the game. So you've got to assess each obstacle and situation and challenge as its own separate situation, if you will. And so I admire those who ask questions, because I always did that. When I went to the University of Miami, I would sit at the driving range and listen to Bob Toski teach people, fancy, schmancy, rich people from New York City all day long. And I did the same thing at Doral with Eddie Bush, because I was a sponge. So I think you have to be open and teachable and really humble yourself. And if you do, you can learn a multitude of things. So that's what I would say. I mean, I would finish playing at a Legends Tour event, and I would get a cart, and I would go out and watch the leaders finish. And I would say, okay, she hits it a lot farther than me. She doesn't hit it any farther than me. And you know who the number one person that I was horrified and was Rosie Jones. Because I looked and I was, wow, what a terrible golf swing. I mean, what an ugly golf swing. Okay, how much money did she make? A lot.
Right.
Does she really care about what I think about her golf swing? No, she could care less about what I think about her golf swing. And the other person is Barb Mucha. Now, Barb Mucha has got the worst grip you've ever seen, the worst setup you've ever seen. She picks the club straight up. She comes over the top of every shot, and she hits it right down the middle of the fairway. And I've said that to her in clinics. So if she was on the phone right now, I would say the same thing to her. So, again, everybody's got their own swing and their own game. And once you know yourself, and you're open and willing to learning, you have to believe in you and let her rip.
Yeah, and you said something a few moments ago which I think is spot on, and that is you need to ask questions. Regardless of whether you're in a group setting or taking individual lessons, you cannot be afraid. And I think a lot of people are because they're afraid of looking stupid. They don't want to ask questions because they don't want to think. They think to themselves, well, maybe it sounds dumb. But that's how you learn. In school it was the same way. Some kids would put their hands up and maybe ask questions, and others would sort of sit quietly, in the shadows, and they would certainly learn a little bit, but they would not engage. And I want students when something happens, or if I'm saying something, I want two things. I want, first and foremost, if they don't understand what it is I'm saying, I want them to say, I'm not sure about that, or can you clarify that? Because as we know, everybody has a different learning style as well. Some people are visual and so forth. And I think that, what I might be saying to one student, they might be receiving it, but another student may not understand it in that format. So I might have to make some changes for that particular student. And I think the other thing is to be engaging and ask questions. If you're out there on the practice tee and you're taking a lesson and something's happening and you're not understanding why it's happening, you need to ask those questions. Say, I'm not clear. Why is the ball doing this? And have your teacher professional or your coach, sort of lay it out for you and say, okay, this is why the ball's reacting this way, and here's how we can fix it. So that this way they're engaging in the conversation, right?
Yeah. Here's what happened on Saturday, and this is funny. We do junior clinics, and I got up at 4 o'clock in the morning to fly back from Boston to do this junior clinic. And one of the dads who I had said, here's the link to sign up, texted me that morning. I forgot to sign up. Can I bring the boys? Now he's got 3 young boys, right? And I was
right.
like, oh, boy, there's going to be way too many kids here. I said, all right, fine, bring the boys. Well, they have a really good friend who already signed up. He followed the rules, and he did what he was supposed to, right? Now, the kid that signed up is pretty new to taking golf lessons from me. And the father told me that he has this situation with his brain, that part of his brain is growing into his spine. So the young boy will never, ever be able to play any contact sports. So this is going to be his game. Now,
right.
2 of the boys, so this boy and one of his friends are both going to be in 6th grade. So they're 11 or 12. And so they get to the range, and the 3 brothers are whacking away like crazy people. And now I've got 11 kids in the clinic, right? So I say to the one boy by himself with the brain thing, I said, all right, here's what I want you guys to do. I want you to hit some balls with your feet real close together, and everybody's got to hit the ball in the air without looking. And the father goes, wait, you don't want them to look at the ball? No, I don't want them to look at the ball. Why? They got to keep their head down. I go, no, they really don't have to keep their head down. So I show them what I want them to do. So the one little boy with the brain thing is hitting balls, and he's getting frustrated, and he looks at me and he goes, why is the ball doing that? And I said, Great question, Elias, great question. So I called everybody over, right? Now, the 3 brothers, the other kids are listening. The 3 brothers aren't paying any attention to me. So the dad of the 3 guys says, I want them to come in every week all winter long. And I said, well, here's the deal. They have to want to do this. It can't be your want. Yes. It has to be their want. So I would like you to go home and discuss their goals, what they want to do. Do they want to make the golf team in 7th or 8th grade? They want to be number 1. Do they want to break 50 for 9 holes? And I said, because to be honest with you, this other little boy over here is really more focused and really working at it. He goes, I can't believe you said that. I mean, the father got so offended at me. I can't believe you said that. My kids have been playing golf all summer long just because they haven't come here. And I said, stop. It's not that. It's not. It's because he's asking me questions. He's not flailing away and whacking balls and raking and hitting. Please don't be offended. I totally
Right.
took this dad off, and I thought, you know what, if that's the case, don't bother coming back. Because you got to have some boundaries and rules, and I'm not a babysitter.
Right.
So
yeah, and that's it. And
so
that's
you're saying about asking, and this kid's 11 or 12 years old, but he's totally engaged, and he wants to know why the ball did what it did. And again, I mean, you just want to say, and guess what? I have the answer for you. Thank you for asking. I'm so glad that you want to know, you know?
Yeah. Well, and as I've mentioned many times on the show, before, I mean, I obviously don't work with a lot of the junior golfers. That's not my particular forte. But even with some of my corporate types, I can tell right away in a lesson whether or not this is going to be a productive lesson by how engaged the individual are. And again, some people I know are a little shy and a little nervous. Most of the corporate types aren't, because if they're got any level of success in their business, they know that to ask questions and that. So usually it's not an issue. But every once in a while, you'll get a small business owner that's goes by the numbers and goes by the stats and things, but doesn't really engage. And it's like pulling teeth sometimes to get these guys to talk. But let's bring Sue in the conversation. I see she's waiting patiently in the wings. So let me just do a quick introduction here, Cindy, and then we'll bring Sue to join us. As we mentioned earlier in the broadcast, of course, our very special guest this morning is Sue Kaffenburgh. She's both a PGA and LPGA professional up at the Bayberry Hills Golf Course in Cape Cod, Massachusetts. She's been teaching and coaching for over 30 years and is one of only a few, as I mentioned. She's a PGA and LPGA member, resident of Cape Cod. She won her first mini tour event in Ohio in 1981 and known as one of the best teachers in the country. She's been recognized for her unique approaching to teaching, winning awards both in the region and nationally, including Top Teachers, New England Golf Magazine in 2007 and 2008 recognized her, American Top Golf Instructors from 2002 and 2003. Been ranked among the top 50 teachers by Golf for Women magazine, and she was the 2001 and PGA Teacher of the Year New England section as well in 2000. So without further ado, Cindy, let's bring on our very special guest this morning, Sue Kaffenburgh.
Good morning.
Good morning. That was a mouthful.
Yeah, I actually had to edit it down because there were so many other accolades I could have added on there, but I wanted to give you some time to talk. But Cindy, go ahead and start. I don't know. Actually, first, let me just ask this question, and then Cindy, I'll flip it over to you to carry on the dialogue. But Sue, let me ask you. Obviously, I know you were sitting there listening to the last little bit of conversation. Being a professional yourself, I'm sure you have lots of students, all age groups and genders, of course, coming to the golf course to work with you. Do you agree with that obviously you want your students to be engaged, and it makes it difficult for you as a professional when they're not engaging, asking questions? What are your thoughts?
Well, I absolutely agree with you. But, as a former school teacher, sometimes you have to make an arena that's comfortable for them to ask questions. And generally, right. Women won't. They just won't. I'm sure, Cindy, you do this too, but, that little pre-lesson interview where I find out what they do for a living or what they like, whatever the answers are there, I'm going to use that language to present information. And all of a sudden, now they're comfortable in an arena they know, even though golf is not something they know. Mm-hmm. So the questions evolve from that. And you do have to engage. So much of teaching these days is just, here's the information, memorize this, I'll see you next week. And it's just not effective.
No. Absolutely. No, you're exactly right. Yeah. Cindy, go ahead.
So you've got some talking points here that you'd like to go over, and you say golf often feels like a game of commandments that leave players confused and frustrated. Miss, like, keep your head down, line yourself up to the target. I totally agree with you, by the way. Turn your shoulders level and shift your weight back. Hit the back of the ball. What if they're all lies? Understanding the truth will help change your beliefs and make your golf game more successful and enjoyable. So tell us what you mean by all that.
Well, so often I have people come to me for lessons, and I ask them what they think they're supposed to do. Most of them come and they say, I know what I'm supposed to do, I just can't do it. Well, that's a dead giveaway, because I know they don't know that they don't know. But so much of instruction and what they come and tell me they're supposed to do, they'll tell me some, place they're supposed to swing the club to on the backswing. And then they'll tell me some place that they have to be for follow-through. And it's like, whatever happens in between those two things is up to the universe. Because too often, that moment, which I think is the number one fundamental, impact, is never described for them. So I hate the word follow-through. I hate it. Because women are going to give you the prettiest little follow-through ever, but it has no relevance to the moment of truth, which is when the club head meets the ball. So all my lessons start from that. What is impact? What does it feel like? And I'll literally put their club with them holding on, put their club against a post or a chair leg so they can feel, well, this is where we're trying to get to at the moment of impact. So now there are lots of different backswings and there are lots of different finishes, but let's make sure that we pass through this moment and make it, a quality moment.
Yeah, I agree with exactly what you said, and you're exactly right. A lot of people are more worried about the way their swing looks as opposed to their impact position. So what do you do to try, Sue? What do you do to try to alleviate that stigma, if you will, when a lot of students come to you and they're worried?
He just left here. He's probably in the parking lot.
They're worried about how their swing looks as opposed to how they hit an impact. I don't know if you heard that.
I missed some of that.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Piece there.
Yeah, I think, Cindy, I don't know if you can hear me, but I'm picking up a lot of feedback in the background, and I don't think Sue heard what I was saying. Basically, what I was asking is just to sort of follow up with what you were talking about, Stu, with impact. How do you sort of alleviate that? Because you get a lot of students that come out that are worried about their golf swing, how it looks, and that sort of pretty little follow through, if you will. What are some of the things that you say to your students to help them focus on impact more?
Well, I'll tell you, I think once you give them impact and give them a situation where they hit the ball first and the ground second and the ball starts to fly, that's what makes them smile. And they lose that self-conscious thing about how you're supposed to look at the end of this motion. If they can deliver the club head and the shaft leaning so that their hands and the handle are ahead of the head, magic happens with a ball. They've never compressed a ball before, and they're just joyful. So it's a big thing for me. And again, I think you talked a few minutes before I came on about the visual and the kinesthetic and all that good stuff.
Yes.
So much of instruction is just verbal, and this is a motor sport. That's the least effective way to get the information across to any student, whether it's a tour pro or a brand new golfer. But if I can show them, and if I can give them literally the feel of it, well, that's magic. Now all of a sudden that becomes part of their experience. So they can go and access that on their own. They can go find a chair leg on the range. We have those nice Adirondack chairs like you all have in upstate New York.
Right. Right.
And they can put their club face right on the flat leg of that, press on it, get the sense that at impact, most of their weight is already on the left for a right-handed golfer. Secondly, that from their front shoulder down to the club head is one line, and that their right wrist has a bend in it. Well, I mean, that's new information for even some players who've been playing for a long time. Once you identify that, that is a gate that they have to get through. and that becomes their focus. And it's kind of easy. It kind of simplifies it. Instead of, okay, you got to have this thought on the backswing. Okay, and don't forget about your head, and don't forget about belly buttons and all this stuff. I find they drink the Kool-Aid very willingly and early.
Right, and I think you're right. I think that a lot of the unfortunately, there's still a lot of teaching out there that involves too much information and not keeping it simple. And one of the things that I try not to do when I'm working with students, and obviously it falls in with the assessment period, but if I know somebody hasn't played golf very much, or maybe they're a beginning golfer, the last thing I'm going to do is start throwing out a lot of golf jargon that they don't understand to add sort of fuel to the fire and make it more confusing. And that sometimes I think people forget that in our profession, is they forget that, not everybody knows all of the ins and outs and all the technical terms and things like that. And there are certainly some students that will gravitate to that, but a lot of students don't. And, as I've said before on the show, Cindy, I don't want them looking at me and their eyes rolling in the back of their head like a slot machine because they don't understand what I'm talking about. Is that something that you are conscious of as well, Sue, in your teaching, is to sort of make sure that you don't get too technical or too verbal, if you will, with a lot of technical terms and things like that are going to be confusing to your students?
The bottom line is this. Once you empower any student to understand they're in charge of the club head and the club face, their whole purpose changes. So you don't even need words, frankly. So I agree with you 100%. You don't need to put, tons of technical jargon in. But to your point about asking questions, how come my ball did that? Well, the balls are lawful, and they will do what the face tells it first and what the past tells it second. So the minute you show somebody that they're hitting it, 30 yards to the right, and can show them that the club face did that, that gives them information that they can process. And they become part of the solution. And it becomes really simple. It really is.
Yeah, I agree.
Such a big thing, and it's like my little banner to make sure that we give them an understanding of club face and what to call that.
Right, exactly.
And I don't know that everyone. I don't know that people understand that, and that's the number one thing. The ball goes where the face points, and once they really stop and pay attention and understand that, the light bulb goes off, like you said, and they can really control what they do with the club. I mean, people are standing on the driving range trying to hit the ball, and it's like, wrong thing. Let's control the face, So I totally agree with you, Sue.
Yeah. And it
so
makes teaching easy, I think. Easier, anyway.
Absolutely. Right. Definitely.
Cindy, I know you've got some more questions. Go ahead.
So, who's your favorite student? What do you like to teach them?
Who's my favorite student? There are two categories of that, and they're equally close to my heart. I had a gentleman come early this season who was just visiting Cape Cod for a month, and he was like 75 years old, shoots his age like nothing. He'd been playing like forever, and yet he was kind of a seat of the pants kind of guy. So I loved being able to explain things to him and empower him even more. And he was like, a total sponge. So I love that kind of student who asks and understands, and you can progress really faster. On the other side of that, I also adore my, higher handicap ladies who, especially one who, keeps showing up to the clinics and private lessons, and she's also 70-something, and just can't get enough and wants more and more. And the conversation is a different conversation. Like you said, you have to be more selective in the words. But I
Yes.
love that she keeps coming and she wants more and more. So, you can't always play favorites. I have two categories.
So open,
well,
open and teachable.
Exactly. That's exactly it. And the age doesn't matter, the gender doesn't matter, and the ability doesn't really matter. It's just that thirst for knowledge. Just tell me how.
Yes.
And help me understand how to use this body that I came with in the best way.
Yeah, I like that, and that that's something that I try to do with a lot of the folks that I work with. Is I want them to sort of have that thirst, if you will, and that's I think a great way to put it. And I want come the end of the lesson, I want them to feel that satisfied, not necessarily that we've solved all the problems necessarily in the lesson, but that they've got that thirst to want to come back, and that they've got almost that they're disappointed the lesson is over. I want them to be excited about what they've learned that particular day, and then to carry that over until the next time that we get together, so that they're out there working on the things. One of the biggest things, Sue, and I'm sure you run into this as most of us do, is students that will come and take lessons but then do nothing in between until the next time they come, and then there's obviously no improvement. What do you do with students like that? Obviously, you want to be able to help them, but does there come a point in time where you sort of just turn to them and say, look, either you've got to start doing something on your part, or you're just sort of, wasting time and money? How do you handle students like that are coming for the lessons, but they're just not doing any of the work in between to seek out improvement?
It's an interesting question. I can, again, the school teacher thing, I'm going to rap them on their knuckles with a ruler, not really. But if they want to come to me and keep coming and I'm not inexpensive, to say the least, that's
right.
prerogative. I learned such a good lesson, like in the beginning of when I was teaching, 25 years ago. And this lady, bless her heart, she came for her lessons with her little dog. And the dog sat there in the lesson. And, things were hard for her. She was a large woman. And make a long story short, after about 4 lessons or so, the improvement was small, but it was there. And she said, Sue, do you think I should keep doing this? And I don't know, thank the Lord, the words came out of my mouth rather than say, well, Vivian, maybe not. But instead I said, Vivian, are you having a good time? And she said, oh, yes, I just love this.
Yeah.
So who was I to judge her degree of satisfaction with improvement? So I'll dismiss people who aren't willing to do what I present to them, but not if they keep coming back.
Sure. Yeah, and you're right. That's a great point that you make, Sue, because you're right. There are some students that there's very modest improvement, but they're enjoying it. And really, the truth of the matter is we want them to have fun playing golf. It doesn't matter whether they, hit it 100 yards down the fairway or hit it, 300 yards down the fairway. If they're enjoying themselves out in the golf course and having fun and playing the game, but also it's become a social thing for them. If they're having fun, you're exactly right. We don't want to, sort of squash that. But there are those students that really are expecting or maybe have high expectations but don't want to put any work in. And, we see that in all facets of life, obviously. But those are the ones, I guess, that I'm really talking about. And I think you answered that as well very eloquently. What do you most want students to know when they come and take a lesson? What is it that you're really trying to get across to them that they can take home from that lesson? What thought or what process do you want them to take away from a lesson?
Boy, that's a great question. I think the bottom line for me, it's not just about my exchanging information with them. I want them to be part of the solution, which means if the number one thing they want, and I'm sure this is true for both of you, the number one thing they want is consistency. You know, some people say, "Oh, I want to hit it farther." Yeah, but it's consistency.
Right.
So,
sure.
In approaching things, I want them to be as much a detective as I am, and say, "Well, if you want consistency, then doing this act is not your best approach." You know, whatever their fault is. You know, for a lot of people, maybe shifting their weight too far to the right on their backswing is going to produce one great shot out of 10, but the 7 of them are going to be unplayable. They'll be topped or fat or whatever. So if I present to them that if you want this, if you want to strike the ball with more consistency, then here are some of the parameters you've got to address. And you can feel that. You can look in a mirror, blah, blah, blah. You know, you've got to be part of that detective work. So when they leave a lesson, I don't want them just to take my information. I want them to take the information so they can solve some of the stuff themselves when they go and hit on the range.
Yeah, you're exactly right. You know, I've often said that really what we do is we provide them with the tools to help them build a better game, but it's really up to them what they do with those tools. And you're exactly right. You know, we're not there to transmit our golf game to them, but just provide them with some of the information that they need to know to develop their own game, but their own solutions to some of the problems and difficulties that they're having. And that was a great way to put it, Sue. Thank you for doing that. Cindy, do you have any final thoughts or questions for Sue? Our time's getting very close.
Yeah, that was awesome what you just said, and I'm going to use that. I'm going to steal it if you don't mind, because you're absolutely right. They do want to be consistent, and you know, it's funny because my whole life I've tried to purchase yardage because I've always wanted to hit it further. And in the last 2 weeks, I got to play with a friend of mine who made a lot of money playing on the LPGA Tour, and when I played with her, I was outdriven when she happened to hit it good by 30, 40 yards. But my reflection after these 3 rounds that I got to play with her was, you know what? I might hit it 30 or 40 yards behind her, but I was in the fairway the whole time, and she was in the woods. And so, again, it's if you say you want this, then will that act produce the result you're looking for? So thank you, Sue. That was great.
Thanks. Yeah, I watched the long drive contest the on TV the other night, and I was amazed that they get 8 balls, I think, or something like that, and like 6 or 7 of them are out of play. They only need 1. I thought that was funny.
Yeah.
Consistency. That's my banner.
There you go.
Right, exactly. Sue, how can the folks, if they're interested, if they're going to be up your way, or do you have a website or something if they want to learn more information about some of the things that you do and your teaching philosophy? Is there somewhere that you can direct them that they can get more information?
Absolutely. It's straightforward. It's my website is Golf Lessons Cape Cod. That's plural, golflessonscapecod.com. And, they can Google my name and everything will come up, or they can reach me at an easy number, which is 508-36-4-GOLF.
Wow. Very good. Well, Sue, we want to take this opportunity and thank you for joining us this morning and sharing some of your thoughts and input about this great game that we all, of course, love. That's why we're doing what we do. And we hope that you'll come back and join us again in the future. But have a great rest of the week, and keep doing all the great things that you're doing. And thank you for being one of the true professionals in this industry. Keep up the great work, and thank you for joining Cindy and I this morning on the Women of Golf.
Thanks. I love doing your show, and Cindy, it was great to see you last week.
Thanks, Sue. Great to see you too. Take care of that beautiful daughter of yours. Oh,
thanks. I will. Bye, guys.
All right.
Thanks.
Bye-bye, honey.
Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. All right, that was our very special guest, LPGA Professional at the Bayberry Hills Golf Course in Cape Cod. Of course, we're talking about Sue Kaffenburgh. Joined us this morning. Thank you, Sue, for some great thoughts and insight into the game. Cindy, as always, we got to wrap up because we're running a little bit tight here, and I know you've got a great lesson to get to. So on behalf of Cindy Miller and I, we want to take this opportunity to thank all of the listeners worldwide for faithfully tuning in. We're growing each and every time we're on air, so thank you for all the new listeners that are coming in. And don't forget to go to blogtalkradio.com/Women of Golf if you want to listen to this broadcast in its entirety. If you happen to miss it, you can go to that link and listen to its entirety on the recorded version. Just scroll down to the on-demand section. And we will be back next week with another great guest. In the meantime, thank you once again for joining us. And again, be safe if you're out making your way back home. For those Floridians that had to evacuate, if you're planning on heading back, just make sure that you check ahead that everything is safe, because I know they're still moving a lot of debris, and there could be still some power outages and things like that. So just make sure that you double check before you get back on the roadways and that, to make sure everything's safe. But on that note, thank you, and Cindy and I look forward to having you join us next week here on the Women of Golf. Thanks, and God bless everybody. Thank you, Cindy, and have a great week.
You too, the same. Bye-bye.
Bye.